Hello and welcome to series of WAIPA short interviews with representatives of investment promotion agencies. My name is Bostjan Skalar and I'm the Executive Director of World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, WAIPA. So the purpose of these interviews is to get an overview how IPAs all around the world are responding to COVID-19 crisis, what measures they are taking and what actions they are planning for the post-COVID-19 era. And today it's my sincere pleasure to have with me Mr. Deepak Bagla. He's the Managing Director and the CEO of Invest India, Investment Promotion Agency, and also Distinguished Vice President of WAIPA Steering Committee. So hello, Deepak, and welcome. I'm really happy to have you with me. And my first question would be, so what's the current situation in India and what measures are being taken to alleviate the impact of COVID-19 on the economy? You can brief us about in general in India and especially, of course, from your perspective from an IPA, how Invest India reacted to this.
Thank you, Bostjan. But first, before that, I must compliment the last time we did that webinar together, your presentation was excellent. And I think some of the points which came out there on how important it was for all of us to work together were really very, very critical and resonated very well with everybody. Well, on India, we are today day 65 of the lockdown. And, we were one of the first, which the government took a very proactive decision on bringing in the lockdown earlier. And I'm glad that that happened. Because if it had not, this pandemic would have spread like wildfire in the country. We have 1.3 billion people, the diversity, both geographically and economically, and the challenge would have been humongous. So when the WHO director on the 23rd of March said that the future of the world and the future of this pandemic depends upon how India handles it, I think now we realize why that was important and why it is so important that the government had proactively, so decisively. And mind you, this is the most unprecedented lockdown ever in human history. Think about 1.3 billion people within 4 hours being brought to a halt and a complete lockdown. And the thing with that has been, so we today are, as I said, day 65 of the lockdown. We have about 154,000 detected cases. And today, and we've had a little over 4,300 casualties. And though each one of them is something we are all serious about, but as you know, the numbers are fairly subdued and the curve is quite flattened so far. And the good thing about that and this proactive locking down has been that the spread has been contained to a few segments, to a few cities. We have about 10 odd cities which would account for about, I would say, 90% of the cases, which is very good so far, as you would see globally. And within those 10, I would say 3 cities would account for roughly about 60, 65%, 70%. So we've been able to contain it well so far. And hopefully we'll be able to get out of it much sooner. The good thing about containment well is that your ability to come out in a V after it makes it much higher as a probability. So what has happened now? So gradually now we are opening up the economy and we've started mobility. Special trains have started, which is already just to carry some of the migrant labor and move them from one location to wherever they were going home. Flights have been resumed, not fully, but partially, especially in areas where they're pretty safe for them to fly around. So that's all been resumed. Business is slowly coming back to normal. Businesses have been now resumed. So essential services were never hit. So for example, 70% of the global's financial transactions are, worked out in India and they are executed in India. And that part of the entire back office activity never stopped right through. And we created a special business immunity platform in Invest India, COVID-19, to help business tide through this effort. So I will not go into those details. I would just suggest that everybody have a look at it. And you've been very kind to say good things about it. So it's on investindia.gov.in, the business immunity platform. Now let us see what is now the current focus of the government. One is how to open up more and how to open it as fast as we can. And at the same point of time, be able to see that we can spread and contain that spread as fast as possible. The good thing which happened during the lockdown that we ramped up our entire medical capacity to a large extent. For example, on the 1st of March, India did not make a single PPE. On the 18th of May, we are now the second largest PPE makers in the world. We have a daily capacity of 400,000, 450,000 a day. So you see how fast we could pivot businesses, especially a lot of startups, a lot of MSMEs, tie them up with the larger companies, bring the entire supply chain and make that happen. And you know the dependence of the entire world on just one or two countries during that period of time and how risky was that. So we've been able to do that all very well, and full credit to the government. Also, as you know, we've now been exporting HCQ tablets to over 123 countries, all in the past 65 days. And the IPA in West India has been closely involved with the government in getting this entire process going, including the logistics of it. So that is one element. Try and see how do we contain the virus. The second is, how do we get business going back now that we are opening gradually? And how do you do that gradual opening up in the best calibrated manner? What has happened, as we all know globally, that this is one of those pandemics which has hurt us both on the demand and the supply side simultaneously. And there's been no precedent to this. There's no playbook on how to deal with this. You know, every morning, the virus takes a new shape, the economy takes a new shape, and you're trying to see how to make it happen. And let's also face it, with this entire pandemic, the balance sheets are fractured, the economies are going down, the finances are going down. So there are also hands tied on how much can be given out and doled out. So I think the focus of the government in India was to see that whatever monetary and fiscal incentives we could bring in to the maximum possible, given within the economic alignments which we can, was to see that it could be, one, bring back demand immediately, that is, bring back wages as first and get jobs back, and also create a foundation for a virtuous cycle of demand and supply to grow out of it. So it's not just with something gets into immediate consumption and dies away. And that is where a large part of the focus of the package of the government so far has been on getting the MSMEs resurrected. You know, we have over 60 million MSMEs. Over 40% of my manufacturing output comes from my MSMEs. In fact, a little over 45% is the exports of India go out of my MSMEs. They account for close to 30% of my GDP, both my service and other manufacturing MSMEs. And not to say that they are one of my largest employers. So a lot of fiscal and monetary support has been provided to that entire segment. It has been to the entire economy, but more so for the MSME segment. The reason is that, one, it will bring back the jobs faster. Two is, the thing about MSME in India is that, one, they are very good at pivoting their business models. Remember, I told you about how we created PPEs suddenly from zero to be the second largest in the world in a period of 60 days. For them to get to new business models, because the post-COVID world is now giving far new set of opportunities to grow. For them to get into that. What the Indian MSME is very well known for globally is frugal innovation. You know, for example, we sent our mission to Mars at a cost which was less than that of a Hollywood movie. And we did it right on the first time. Please remember, the superpowers took 10 attempts and they took over $1 billion and things like that. So that is where, and a large part, the MSMEs were very involved in that too. So that frugal innovation, what happens with frugal innovation is the best utilization of resources which are given there. So that rupee or that dollar which is given to them as an incentive goes straight back into business to revive it and to get it going. That also turns out that the velocity of money when given to MSMEs is much higher than elsewhere, at least in the Indian context, I would say. And the moment the velocity of money gets higher, you get a virtuous cycle which gets evolved out of it of demand and supply. So the point here is that how do we create those jobs? How do we resurrect those businesses? How do we resurrect those supply chains? And with those supply chains, we get the engine moving again. So that demand and supply has been happening a lot. Very interestingly, agriculture, which is a big segment in India, 70% of my population lives in my villages. Approximately, I would say that's about 12% of the world's population. And that is largely dependent on agriculture to a large extent. So that is where, again, we are bringing it up. And the good news there is that I was just seeing some statistics on usage of pesticides, spending on pesticides, fertilizers, and I see that has gone up in the past 30 days. So that demand is picking up, and that entire sector is showing a very positive result of coming back on. So hopefully what we are trying to see is that if we can get that V shape in our recovery and not a very elongated U or a plateaued U. And that is where this entire effort of the government is, and how to build on that immediate effort to take it forward as a foundation.
Okay, this what I hear from you is especially a very concerted action. So I will not go to the second, but I will now go to the third question, and I later ask you the second question. So why do you believe, and what I actually hear from you, are IPAs more relevant than ever? And why is the cooperation with other institutions so vital? Not just the government, because what I hear is government is very proactive. So obviously, to be able to make concerted action or concentrated, orchestrated action, obviously you need to have a very good coordination among the different stakeholders within the government or outer stakeholders. Would you find this important, being in touch with different institutions, even within the government or even within among the states? I mean, you have I don't know how many states exactly, but all this coordination that goes throughout the whole country.
Bostjan, to my mind, and that is when I take you back to my COVID platform, the moment you go through one of my daily reports, you will realize how important an IPA is, especially in a country and a structure like ours. We have about 28 states. We have another 9 union special territories, 11, so 37 of them. It becomes extremely complex. Now you have the state governments, which is the federal government. Then you have the central government, and that is the government aspect. And then you have a large number of corporates, which are quasi-government. Then you have the private sector. That is the entire set of the corporate world. And then you have civil society. And the important critical element is that how do you bring them all in together? Yeah. For example, when we were able to create 450,000 PPEs on a daily basis, it all happened because we could join the dots. And in times of a pandemic like this, you need all elements of society and government to work together. Otherwise, it will not happen. Nowhere in the world can the government by itself handle such a precedence, or the private sector, or the corporate sector, or civil society. And this is where Invest India played a very critical role, which is where it was not just about sorting out queries, which was a 24/7 helpline, but trying to see, we had a large number of private corporates coming to us and saying, we want to support, how do we help? So, understanding where that requirement is, they had the resources. You had the civil society saying, we need 100,000 lunches a day for my city. I'm willing to get them. Can you get me the funding? Mm-hmm. We needed the government at one end to try and see, how do we maintain law and order? How do we try and bring in the new elements of containment? How do we get that entire medical supply chain in place? How do we see that the essential supplies are taken care of? And that was the time when you had an IPA like Invest India working all together, because you are a neutral element. And nobody has the problem on working and reaching out to you. And that's when you join the dots and you start results happening. That jigsaw falls in place only when you have somebody who can put the pieces together. And that's where I see now the big role of the IPA. And going forward, it becomes very critical, because the post-COVID world is going to be completely different from the pre-COVID world. Let's face it. And in this new world, which is yet unknown, but we have some underlying trends, there will be a completely new set of requirements for the private sector especially, and a completely new set of policy initiatives which the government will have to take. The role of the IPA is to be the voice of the corporate and the private sector in the system, to try and see how do you match policy to the new requirements. How do you bring in new policy to be able to capitalize and optimize on the new opportunities? And how do you bring in the new policies which are required for the private sector to be able to recreate jobs and to recreate the economy? So this voice of the system, which makes it very critical for an IPA's role going forward. Also in identifying those new trends and seeing how do you create the building blocks in each of those countries. And most importantly, how do we join hands together with other IPAs across the globe to create those building blocks? So the advantage, we cannot remain in an island, but yet at the same time, you've got to see and create a world which is de-risked, where supply chains do not get disrupted in such a manner as we saw them happening.
Actually, you've been coming already to my question. Let's say, as a leader of IPA, of course, you see, you can predict what will be, let's say, the field of investment promotion in the long term. Maybe it will be shaped in a different manner. Maybe even IPAs are not ready and they need to adjust their strategies or their promotion tactics, actually, and use this COVID, I presume, more as a chance rather than a problem. Would you agree with this?
Absolutely, it is. And that is what our Prime Minister has said. It has presented to us the biggest opportunity ever. And it's an opportunity where we can create a new India, and a completely different new India with a totally different positioning on the global phase too, by using the strengths where they are. So what is happening there? Let's see it. Let me give you an idea of just one of the trends which is happening. Gone are the days where we could run our road shows, where we could go on meetings together and meet them. So just this morning, we've been having a set of these investors who've been now looking to move to India very quickly. And you see the number of states we have, as I mentioned to you, each state having different set of advantages. So now we've started doing these very exclusive investor meets, a Shark Tank, so as to say, where the state governments come and pitch up to an investor. So we just had one set of those series which are going on. And there's some very interesting learnings on that one. But it's not just those pitches, it is actually creating a set of dialogues and creating those continuous form of dialogues where there is exchange of views, exchange of learnings. And I think that is what will help us all create the new ideas to put those foundation blocks, as we spoke about, of the post-COVID era world. And yes, we all have to learn how to work on a distance in many ways, maybe just virtually, but at the same time know that we're going to remain as close to each other as ever. And that's where it comes back. WAIPA today will play a central role in the post-COVID world.
I guess what is our common task is to get to know all the governments around the world, to be aware how important IPAs are. And I guess what I also see from our, let's say, platform that we shared, let's say, your experience, we shared other IPAs experience, it's very obviously the IPAs really played and are still playing a crucial role of how to respond to pandemic, and especially now how to prepare the governments and the other institutions within the country to be able to serve the new normal, as you said, and to be really empowered, which sometimes it's not. For example, you are lucky, so your government was very proactive and gave you really free hands to be able to serve to especially existing investors. But we need to persuade all of our principals, if I may call them like this, that they will understand the importance of IPAs, right?
It's a no-brainer. The IPA needs to have, and as you always said, that little arm's length from the government, and yet they're being completely supported by them. I think the new world order, and while it is getting formulated, the IPAs are in the best position because they are the ones which can join the dots, as I told you, between those three elements of the government, the private sector, and social society together. So even if it is reskilling which is required, that can be brought back by the IPAs. If it is new policy requirements, that can be suggested by the IPAs. If there are new opportunities in business, that can be brought by the IPAs to the private sector.
Exactly. Actually, it was really a pleasure to hear from you, and I'm sure the listeners and the audience who will watch this video will learn many new things. I always appreciate your active role, not just as an investment promotion agency of India, but also as our, let's say, steering committee vice president. So you are always sharing with our membership a lot of good insights, and the people really appreciate. And as you say, we should put the dots together. We should also work hand in hand to assist the whole, I would say, FDI world and persuade the investors that there is still a lot of opportunities to invest in, not just in the sectors like, I mean, health, which is now, of course, the most in a need, but also others. And even if there will be a new normal, I guess investors will be still willing to invest, especially with a great support of an IPA. So with this, I want to thank you. And really, it's always a pleasure to exchange opinions with you. To our audience, I would say thank you very much for listening or for watching the videos, and follow us on our social media, and also visit our webpage, where I also mentioned, actually, we put lots of information and lots of experience from colleagues from IPAs, how they are responding to challenges. And please stay tuned. And again, Deepak, thank you so much. I really appreciate. And what I would say at the end is stay healthy and safe, and stay active as you are always.
Thank you, Bostjan. And I must say, one brilliant work being done by your office. I look at your reports all the time. My entire team does it. And frankly, on a personal level, we are blessed that you are with us in this team, the way we're taking it forward. And we are really blessed that you are there, especially at this point of time.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate. So have a good day, and keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.